Hi all. This week you should start preparing sources for your final project. Your annotated bibliography will be the next check-in that you have for this project, and it is due October 10th. For more information on the specifics of the assignment, see the final project wiki and Learning Block 3 for details. Details. I want to stress a few points about the taking sides reading. When posting to the discussion forums on the taking sides reading, please do not cut and paste your outline. If you do this, you will lose points. I have students submit an outline of the reading before they post to the forum in order to show me that they have read and understood the reading. After you have processed the reading, you should post comments that critique or explain what side of the debate you stand on in the discussion forum. You may use some of your comments from the outline in the discussion forum, but not the entire outline. When posting to the Taking Sides discussion forum, your responses should add significantly to the discussion by building on others' comments, suggesting alternative views, pointing out problems, and constructively disagreeing. Saying "I agree" is not enough to add to a discussion, except on the rare occasions when those two words sum it up well. Posts that do not add something else to the conversation will lose points. In our voice thread primary source discussions, we are doing great. I want to encourage us this week to start responding to one another. On the Think About It slides, try responding to one of your classmates in a respectful way. Our online discussion should be conducted in the spirit of collegiality. It is an opportunity to ask questions and share thoughts, ideas, and experiences with one another for the sake of advancing our knowledge and understanding of relevant issues. Be respectful of others' ideas, but also feel free to share different perspectives or opinions. When disagreeing with another person's position, do so positively and politely. That way, we'll stay friends and with those with whom you disagree with, and you'll be more likely to get your point across. For help with the discussion starters that will allow us to forward the discussion in a polite manner, see the prompts that I have provided for you. Have a great week. Email me with any questions.